Transcending time and space, let us take you to the place inside your mind where thoughts divide and mysteries unwind. Join us every Monday evening right here on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time. And you will catch the Fenton Perspective with our great host, Lorian Fenton. Come listen in as she shares her amazing stories from the past to present, along with all of her guest secrets to the future. That's the Fenton Perspective every Monday evening right here from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time, only on Revolution Radio. Oh, and you don't need to expect us. We're already here.
These guys are hammers, and to hammers everything looks like nails.
I heard that.
You were meant to. So you see something that's important, you call it out, we'll make it happen.
Okay. Mother Nature is a serial killer. No one's better, more creative. Like all serial killers, she can't help the urge to want to get caught. What good are all those brilliant crimes if no one takes the credit? So she leaves crumbs. Now the hard part is seeing the crumbs for the clues they are. Sometimes the thing you thought was the most brutal aspect turns out to be the chink in its armor, and she loves disguising her weaknesses as strengths.
If you can fight, fight.
Head north if you can. Hello? Is there anyone out there hearing this?
Help each other.
Mexico City has been declared complete loss.
Be prepared for anything. Our war has just begun.
We are the hammers, and we are the nails. The world stands upon the precipice of total insanity, and we need you, and we hope you need us, bringing information, news, and as much truth as we can eke out before Mother Nature turns us to crumbs. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, working to become millions of voices singing in unison to bring the sanity back home.
Enter into a world unseen on Raven Star's Witching Hour. You will encounter eclectic topics from the realm of spirit brought into our matrix of truth. With your host, the Solaris Blue Raven. Solaris will bring you an array of unique guests covering topics from ghostly spirits to amazing anomalies, covert technology, UFOs, and shadowy global events.
And that's right here, Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, Saturdays midnight till 2 a.m. Eastern Time. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
Let the magic rise.
Did you ever feel that things were not quite right? That everything was just ever so slightly askew?
Do you have, to paraphrase Morpheus, a splinter in your mind?
If you're interested in hearing the latest information about UFOs, the paranormal,
ancient cultures and structures,
monatomic elements,
longevity,
fantastic discoveries in science,
downloaded to your brain,
then tune into us. Hi, I'm Dave.
And I'm Mackie.
And we are Shiny Side Out, Sundays 2 to 4 a.m. Eastern. See you then.
Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here. Revolution Radio. listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Talk Now Radio, listener-supported radio, where no topic is taboo and your support keeps it that way. Brought to you by Revolution Radio, also listener-supported radio, where information never sleeps. And as everybody knows, I'm Royce, the Redneck Radio Man. Joining me today is going to be Dan Willis, and we're going to be discussing who is controlling America's perception of reality, especially regarding the UFO phenomena, which he's got a website up on this here particular topic, and I'm going to put a link in the chat room to it. That is pretty much in depth. It's going to take some time for you to read. It's more than one page, but it's probably well worth the read, especially if you're new to the subject. And it's a great place to get a start for people that are new to it. And for other people, it's a great place to brush up and to maybe get other information that wasn't at some of the other sites they had already been at. So, Dan, how you doing today?
Doing good.
Okay. Well, I got to tell you, I've been looking forward to this here show with you. Oh, yeah, and real quick, like the web address was thenewwebmatrix.net/disclosure.
Oh, they can just go to thewebmatrix.net and it'll link right in.
Oh, really? Okay. I thought maybe the Web Matrix was like a big host like Yahoo GeoCities, and that the disclosure was like a sub-host off from it or a subdomain off from it or something like that. But I guess I assumed incorrectly on that one.
Nope, just little old me.
Okay. All righty. Well, like I told you earlier, I'd done quite a bit of reading on this here, and you went a lot further back in history on this than what I had expected you to. But what I think I'm going to do to first start this here out is, since you were one of the, I think it was like 400 witnesses at the Disclosure Project, I think it was many years back, about 10 years back or more. I remember when I saw this here with Dr. Stephen Greer. Why don't we give it a little information or background on what your participation in that was, like how and why did the Disclosure Project come into being?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, it seems that that article I wrote was because of I used to be an ABC newsman and a broadcast engineer, and they wanted me to write an article on media control, and it's just a new education for myself. Just a couple of months ago, I spent months researching how the media control, because I had firsthand experience with the media. How this whole thing came about was we've had CIA directors, we've had presidents denied access into the UFO subject for some years now. And it seems Clinton had an interest in the UFO subject and had a CIA director, which was James Woolsey, rather, look into the matter. He tried to gain access to the UFO files, but was denied access to the CIA director, So here's a frustrated CIA director, unable to gain access through the normal traditional channels, which you'd think if anybody'd have a need to know, the director of Central Intelligence would have a need to know. So he looked in the civilian sector. The head of the Center for the Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence at the time was Dr. Stephen Greer. So we had Dr. Greer over for a dinner meeting. Dr. Greer brought a huge stack of documents and, substantiating the reality of the thing. Before even looking at it, the director said, I know the subject's real. I'm just trying to find out why the hell I can't gain access to it. So Dr. Greer, kind of shocked and aware of the gravity of the situation, the director of the CIA can't gain access to the UFO subject. He met with some military advisors. This is back in 1993, by the way. And so they decided, if you have one or two, no matter how high level or whatever, witnesses try to come out to expose the reality of the situation, they get discredited or worse. So they decided to gather hundreds of witnesses. And so between 1993 and in the year 2000, they gathered over 450 witnesses. That includes generals, admirals, astronauts, even sergeants with high-level security clearance, people in the military and the intelligence community and the corporate sector, who've had firsthand experience, and also had a lot of them had supporting official documentation. So his plan was to go to the National Press Club and do a world disclosure event. And so I was one of 100 of the witnesses that was videotaped. And my particular testimony, by the way, I had a high-level top-secret clearance in the United States Navy. Back in 1969, I was high-speed code operator at Naval Communication Station in San Francisco, which was the busiest communication hub on the planet.
Was you allowed access to the UFO phenomena?
Well, not allowed access to it, but I got exposed to it. Let's say. I was in charge of ship-to-shore communications. I was monitoring 9 different channels, all sending in high-speed code. I was a high-speed certified code operator. One of the ships, USN ship off the coast of Alaska, the crew on the ship witnessed off port bow coming out of the ocean, they're called a USO when they're under the water, an unidentified submerged object. This thing was about 70 feet in diameter. It was glowing brightly a reddish orange in color, and it came out of the ocean. It was an elliptical object, a saucer essentially, and it shot straight up into space. The crew witnessed this visually, and the radar operator substantiated it and tracked it going over 7,000 miles per hour. This is about the time we're going to the moon. Back in 1969, this was headed off to this report was classified as secret, priority level, and was going to the Chief Naval Operations in Washington, D.C.
The biggest doggone swamp gas and fastest swamp gas you ever saw.
Yeah, those big old orange balloons popping out of the water, yeah. My testimony was baby poop, I guess you'd say, compared to the other guys. What happened was 21 witnesses were to testify in front of all the major media of the world at the National Press Club, and one of the guys chickened out because people are breaking national security oaths and things. So what happened was I volunteered to fill in a position that the other people that had testimonies, we were talking about, nuclear launch officers shutting down multiple ICBMs, a base on the other side of the moon, visually witnessed, NASA airbrushing the UFOs out before releasing to the public, that we've already categorized back in 1989 over 57 different species, on and on and on. I mean, just explosive evidence. My little testimony was just a small supplement of over 450 witnesses that did not testify, but I became intimately aware of all the testimonies. And the night before going to Washington, I was tossing and turning. I was trying to imagine. I became very aware of the testimonies that were going to be disclosed to the major media of the world, and I couldn't imagine how. Especially the fact that we have the witnesses within the black projects that had a solution to get off of nuclear, oil, coal, all the obsolete, damaging technologies that the world's been running on for over 60 years. This has been hidden in these black projects, and we have the scientists willing to come out and prove that these things are real. All this explosive testimony. So I was tossing and turning, and in my dream, I saw everybody give at the National Press Club their testimony, and then an MJ-12 operative came up and discredited everybody, and everybody had their mouths dropped. They knew it was a lie. They were covering it up, and But the next morning I had to get on the plane to go to Washington, and it turns out they didn't need any MJ-12 operative to discredit the whole thing. The hour and a half event, which anybody can see by going to disclosureproject.org, and you can follow through the links. There's a YouTube video on it, full hour and a half meeting. It effectively was sanitized by the mainstream media. They basically made what we were attempting to do was to go to a congressional hearing on the matter, and they said as a group of scientists and things wanting to say that we're not alone and that UFOs are real, and that's the whole purpose of the whole thing, but actually was disclosing the illegal government operations that have infiltrated into our government, and that these elements have been hidden from the people of the world, since in the times of the 40s.
Well, the thought occurs to me, I think it was Truman or Eisenhower, I think it was Truman, was said to have signed a treaty with extraterrestrials, made a deal with them, by which they would exchange technology if we allowed them to kidnap people for experiments, etc. If that was a true case, you could see why they'd want that thing to be secretive back in the very beginning. But, I mean, after a new administration comes in to continue the secrecy, it's just making a new law you're breaking yourself, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah, it was Eisenhower back in 1954.
Eisenhower, that's what I was trying to think of. Okay.
Yeah, it was called the Grenada Treaty with Zeta Reticuli. That they could, in exchange, it was the first group that was a more advanced, you could say spiritually, that wanted to help the world with its spiritual evolution, you could say, but they wanted us to, take out our nukes. And they didn't want to take out the nukes, and they wanted technology in exchange. So the Zeta Reticulans, they were willing to cut the deal and give some technology, but things went sideways on that whole deal. But all this happened back. You look back the control, the whole media control issue on the whole thing. You go way back to. There's been a cabal of financial interests that had their fingers in the pie on this planet for a long time. They have a lot of different names. You can follow the money, you know who they are. Anyway, back in 1917, they started media control by controlling all the major newspapers, which were then controlled by the Council of Foreign Relations. I believe Rockefeller, J.P. Morgan, and Wahlberg, one that got us on the Federal Reserve, started that. And then the same group, back in 1933, funded the Nazis into existence. And in 45, essentially we won the war with Germany, right? But the Nazis, essentially, with the help of their agents within the United States, all escaped. And they essentially infiltrated the CIA. And they had plans way ahead of time. They had a fallback plan that they knew the war wasn't going right, and they were planning on basically infiltrating the United States and use what they called Weltanschauungskrieg, which means worldview warfare, and which is basically a psychological operation to control all of the media, control the education, control everything. So as generations, get born into this new reality, there's a perception matrix so that it basically keeps their operations hidden. So they were able to infiltrate the CIA with the help of Allen Dulles and NASA, Project Paperclip, and basically using our national security system to hide their hidden operations. And, back in 1946, right after the end of World War II, the Rockefeller Foundation went in and they rewrote our history books on the official history of what happened in World War II, and also the Nazi occult connections. And so what happened was they brought in there was a lot of paranoia back at that time about the Soviets, and General Reinhard Gehlen, who was the chief Nazi intelligence spy for Hitler. He basically took all the Soviet intelligence information, hid them in these little canisters in the Bavarian Alps, and used it as a bargaining chip with President Truman through Allen Dulles in order to bring an entire network of Nazi spies, which added up to about 3,000 of them, into the CIA. And it was OSS then, but then eventually in 1947 turned into the CIA.
What year was that in?
That was 1947. That's when the CIA was created. Same with Roswell happened, and also MJ-12 was created to oversee the whole project. And so they lied. They lied to Truman on the Soviet estimates because Truman was about ready to shut down he saw it as a peacetime threat, the intelligence community. So they decided to lie. Allen Dulles was aware of that, and they fed him all these lies about the false Soviet, estimates. And so they created the Cold War, which they pumped about $8 trillion into. And Allen Dulles also rewrote all the paperwork for the Nazis, so they gave them new identities, and they scattered throughout Argentina and South America and everything. That was about 5,000 Nazis. So, but 250,000 of them were unaccounted for, as well as the top scientists. And we have witnesses that knew about they were masters at making underground facilities, and they had back in 1938-43 they had made Base 211, which was underneath Antarctica, and so there was over 100 U-boats, including their most advanced models. I mean, they did it. The Nazis did. Their technology was so far advanced from what we had. They had flying disc factories. They had 9 of them. One was destroyed. 8 of them were relocated down to Antarctica, in Brazil, up in Norway. Anyway, they have these black projects, you could say, that money was being funneled in, through the CIA to these operations to fund the Nazis, all on the American taxpayer bill. So
was that the only place? That would be the question. I mean, you mentioned 1933 a few minutes ago, and that reminded me that back in 1933 there was a big gold compensation thing that went on that nobody ever got their gold back. You remember, people weren't even allowed to have it at the time, and I can't help but wonder, what did they do with all that gold when they confiscated it?
Well, there was a whole lot of gold taken, confiscated with the Nazis from all over the place. But, back in 1933, the fascist bankers were planning on doing a Nazi coup, to take over the United States government, even set up concentration camps and get rid of undesirables. It was plotted by J.P. Morgan, Prescott Bush, George H.W.'s grandfather, rather, and George W.'s grandfather, and I believe it was Warburg. Anyway, they were planning on taking it over. They wanted to use the veterans, which were led by General Nedley Butler, who was highly decorated Marine Corps general war veteran. He went along with it, pretending like he was all on board with it, but he exposed the plot, and thanks to him, we didn't have a fascist society back in 1933. He exposed the whole thing. They were planning on having 500,000 troops come in, storm Washington, and take over. So they've been working on this one world fascist government regime for a long time.
Now, was this going to be a one world government with a one world religion and a one world currency?
Well, they want to consolidate control, and it seems that that's consistently been the plan, throughout history. If you look at the track record of these guys, it's all about, control, and it's about, back once they infiltrated, Dulles started the control of the mainstream media through Operation Mockingbird back in 1950. And in 1951, CIA had their Hollywood liaisons start to formulate the movie scripts. Any movie script that had to do with the UFO or ET subject matter, starting with The Day the Earth Stood Still, every single movie you see even to today that has anything to do with extraterrestrials or UFOs has been formulated to give a certain perception. You see all these evil alien movies, coming in, like Independence Day, and all the rest of them, that they just evil aliens coming in here to Earth, to take over our planet and kill us all. And we know that, one of the witnesses, who was a spokesperson for Werner von Braun, who kind of got on the inside of these guys, he said, one of the first threats was the Soviet. That would be a lie, and we know that for sure. And then there would be rogue nations, and then we'd have terrorists, and we have 9/11 event, start the war on terror, and then he said, well, then there was going to be other false flag events that were planning in order to have this one world government, and ending with the final one being a false extraterrestrial one. And we know from even the witnesses that joined me in Washington that they've had what's called alien reproduction vehicles back in the 50s. They have these faster than light advanced craft. As Rich said back in 1993, anything you can imagine we've already done. We have the technology to take ET home, but it would take an act of God in order to get these things out of the black projects to benefit humanity. And so it's been.
Is our government the only one that has these flying craft, or does all the governments have it, and all the governments are keeping it secret from everyone?
Well, the United States is the primary controlling element on this matter, and it's more of a not individual governments, like Russia and China and things like that. It's more of a trans multinational corporations that back in 1944, before the end of the war, they set up what was called Operation Eagle Flight, which the Nazis had huge amounts of wealth. Even here they even were able to get King Solomon's treasure out of the south of France, which had a huge amount of gold, and not to mention, priceless artifacts of ancient knowledge, that was hidden for centuries by the Knights of Templar, from the ancient mystery schools, which, the whole occult thing with the Nazis were totally in the thinking out of the box and whole other approaches to science than the mainstream. So they took all this money and they bought over 750 corporations. And so back in 1954, one of our witnesses, General Lovekin, who was on Eisenhower's staff at the time, he was aware that the corporations were taking control, and Eisenhower got sold out. And I have a small little audio clip on that, if you'd like.
Yeah, I was about to say, why don't you go ahead and play that real quick?
But what happened was Eisenhower got sold out. I think that he realized that all of a sudden this matter is going into the control of corporations. He realized that he was losing control. He realized that this phenomenon of whatever it was that we were faced with was not going to be in the best hands, and that those were as far as I can remember, that was the expression that was used. It's not going to be in the best hands, and so it has turned out to be.
And everybody remembers, when Eisenhower left office in '61, he gave kind of a cryptic warning, about the unwarranted influences, within the industrial military complex, and that only an alert and knowledgeable citizenry could prevent them, intruding upon our liberties and freedoms. And Kennedy spoke of that too. They said there was a plot. He actually said that in front of a university, that there was a plot to take away people's freedoms, and he's planning to expose it before he leaves office. And Kennedy also talked about the dangers of secrecy, and that
secret
societies, and that there is a conspiracy, a worldwide conspiracy that is covert in operation, that is using its means of infiltration to expand its sphere of influence. Both of these warnings. We haven't heard any warnings since LBJ to present, but both these presidents were very aware of the situation that was going on, and one of our witnesses, Edgar Mitchell, the sixth man to walk on the moon, he said that there was a cabal of insiders that were studying alien bodies and things, that they stopped briefing presidents after JFK.
Which you can explain why Clinton wasn't able to get into the inside of that.
Exactly. And the MJ-12 group, that it was General Twining that highly suggested that to Truman, to start a government within a government that have no oversight, which would be the Majestic 12 group. Eisenhower in 1954, he was funded by Rockefeller, for his presidential campaign. He had a secret executive order that created a new MJ-12, all new members. It was basically all the cabal's boys, headed by Allen Dulles, and there was a top secret Majestic document that one operative pulled out of the fire. It's called the Byrne Memo, and it's talked about MJ-1, which was Allen Dulles talking to the other members of the Majestic 12, saying that Lancer, was code word for JFK, is looking into our activities, and that we must not allow this. And shortly after that, he was murdered. And that Allen Dulles was the CIA director during JFK's administration,
right.
And he was fired by Kennedy, and because of the subversive activities that he was doing, working with the same faction of the Nazis that were working, with the cabal. And so what happened after he was murdered, of course, LBJ assigned Allen Dulles as the head of the Warren Commission and determined there was no conspiracy involved, but, anybody who knows, researches the whole thing, they can see there's a lot of indications.
Yeah, let's say there's no conspiracy involved. Why do the same names keep popping up at crucial points in history as being a changing force?
Exactly. If there's no fire, there sure is a lot of smoke, as they say.
Yeah, cigarettes don't smoke that much. They have very little fire. Now, one of the things that puzzles my mind, or I wonder about, is how many people in elected office or in the White House, by percentage, would you say really realize that they're nothing more than puppets for the shadow government?
Certain amount do. After we did the National Press Club, the witnesses gathered in teams. We met with about 24 congressmen and senators up on Capitol Hill in private meetings. We brought along a 500-page briefing, executive briefing document, along with a 4-hour video which has all the witness testimonies on it. Which nobody's going to, everybody's so busy they don't have time to crack. That kind of stuff. And the attitude up on Capitol Hill was pretty much, this is not on my watch. This is too much of a hot potato type of thing, So, one congressman said, he said, I couldn't believe it. He said, there's actually a secret government in control here. There's some that are aware. I'm sure there's a certain amount, but I guess we got the best government money can buy, huh?
I guess so. I guess some people lower down are aware of it, and they just have no clue what can be done about it, especially from their positions, in other words.
Well, Royce, what happened, a good indication of where they stand, to answer your question more accurately, was, after we did the National Press Club, which the first hour was jammed, which they believe the NSA was jamming it for the first hour, was 500,000 people logged on. Because the first part was pretty explosive. It basically, highlighted that our government has been infiltrated and we've had these technologies for a long time and everything. What happened was, after the mainstream media basically sanitized it thoroughly, Dr. Greer decided to tour across the United States into the major cities, and I joined him in about a dozen major cities on the West Coast, and we rented huge halls, Masonic halls and whatnot, with video projectors. We were able to get the 4-hour video down to 1 hour, because people can't sit for that long. And we got standing ovations. And we're asking people to write letters to the senators and congressmen, but, people just don't have time to do that kind of thing. So I have some internet skills, and I was able to put together a list of all the senators and congresspeople and the president, and even foreign embassies around the world, so people can contact their countries, and I put an online fax together. And about 30,000 faxes people sent out to their senators and congresspeople, and I was asking them to send me what the responses are. The fax going out was pretty, saying, here we have the witnesses, we have these people, highly decorated men, women, that are, willing to testify under oath, and so forth, on a congressional hearing. And so the letters started coming to me. I got about 80 of them. People were able to send to me what the president and the different Congress and senators were saying, and I began to see a pattern. Most of them were saying, well, thank you very much, your standard brush-off canned letter, we'll keep your views in mind if the extraterrestrial issue or the...
We'll call you.
Yeah, exactly. But a lot of them were doing official letters of denial from, Project Blue Book, which was, from, the Condom Committee and the Robinson Panel, and all the that there's nothing to it, and that the Air Force has shut the whole thing down with Project Blue Book, and that NASA says there's absolutely no evidence, and so a few people were giving official denials, but most of them were basically just. It sounded like most of them were indoctrinated and out of the loop, which make total sense. Why would they bring, a senator or congressman into this type of thing? These are deep black projects. What happened back in 1954 with the corporations that Eisenhower lost control to is they created what was called unacknowledged special access projects, or USAPs, which means that it doesn't matter if you're the president or the head of Central Intelligence or whatever, you're denied that this project even exists. It's unacknowledged. So by doing so, you have trillions of dollars being funded into these unacknowledged black projects that basically started back in when the Nazis essentially infiltrated. And with their, you got to understand, the Nazis are just a faction within this group. I'm sure they're competing amongst themselves, but, you look at the wealthy bank interests, the same names that keep coming up all the time, and they're agents within the United States that assisted the Nazis through the whole thing. So they all work together in kind of an orchestrated manner. Oh. And so they have these black projects of this, as Richard Dolan speaks of, a breakaway civilization that has advanced technology and genetics, space travel, things that seem like science fiction to the average guy out there. paying for their electric bill and driving their gas SUV and everything.
In other words, the Rothschilds could have a summer house on Mars we're unaware of.
Yeah, well, it appears there's bases on not only the moon and Mars, but they have capabilities that it just seems like science fiction to the average person, and Werner von Braun's warning doesn't sound so far-fetched when you consider that, they could hoax an extraterrestrial threat if they wanted to. And with all the programming into the subconscious minds of millions of people of all the CIA-influenced movie scripts having to do with extraterrestrials, of evil aliens, coming to destroy us, which has been, I'm not sure about all of them being good out there, but obviously you and I are still having this conversation.
Right.
So, they very well could pull it off if they wanted to. One of the witnesses that joined me, Mark McCandish, his colleague Brad Sorensen, back in 1988, he was at an exhibit at Norton Air Force Base for top brass, where he actually saw 3 hovering saucers of different sizes, and they were, said alien reproduction vehicle, and he gave the details of how they work and everything. Anyway, I sat down at the bar with Mark McCandish before we went to the press club, and he had a diagram that he brought of what the inside. He was a technical illustrator, and so he had a very beautiful, detailed drawing how this whole thing was put together, the capacitors, the mercury tube in the middle, and it had a kind of a Tesla configuration. I have a pretty good science background, so I was understanding most of it. But what was interesting to me was that the primary element was in the center tube, which was a mercury vapor. And, Hitler and Himmler, they searched the world for ancient knowledge. And in India, the ancient Brahmanas, if you read, they used what was called this mercury engine to get the craft to fly. It was
sounds like the same one Hitler was using, in other words.
Exactly. Yeah, the saucers of the Reich, which they had channelings back in 1919 by the Virile Girls that were getting these technical plans from 65 light years away in the constellation of Taurus, and there were an ancient Sumerian script. And what was fascinating was that when they translated this, Dr. Schumann of the University of Munich there in Germany, who was the one who discovered the Schumann resonance, of the Earth, he found there was viable physics in this thing, and they were actually able to, and they also recovered in 1938, there was a crash ET craft that, like in Roswell, that happened in the Black Forest. So they had not only channeling, but they had actually wreckage they were able to recover, reverse engineer, and the scientists were brilliant, thinking outside of the box and pulling all this information, ancient knowledge from India and everything. And, it very well may be that they cut a deal. There's indications that they cut a deal with Zeta Reticuli maybe like 20 years before Eisenhower did. And so they may have this huge leap and been working underground all this time with their, saucer factories But anyway, didn't mean to go off on a long tangent on that.
Well, that's all right. I was just thinking, though, how do we know if the Rothschilds are the ones pulling the main strings, or are the Rothschilds really puppets for E.T.?
Well, that's a hard one. I don't have the answer to that. But, if you keep following the patterns, all I can do is look at indicators that keep on repeating, like repeating patterns to try to, I don't claim to have all the pieces of the puzzle to put it together. We only have about, 500 pieces of the puzzle, from all these witness testimonies. And when you have witnesses that don't know each other, that have official official documentation. Like many of the witnesses that joined, I tried to get my documentation through the Office of Naval Intelligence, but they said the document's been destroyed. But the other ones that joined me, such as John Callahan, head of the FAA Investigations Division back in the Reagan era, the CIA swore him to secrecy, said we can't release this to the public, and they confiscated everything he had. But he had backups of everything. So he brought up all the backups along with Captain Salas. He had the Office of Special Investigations of the Air Force, all the supporting documents. Let's see, who else we have? It was several witnesses there that had the official documentation to back up. So you've got like 500, people who don't even know each other with official documentation. I would say you have a pretty good indication something's going on.
Well, yeah, because you'd expect differences, contradictions and stuff like that. And, if you don't have any contradictions, then you got to question that as well. But, if you got kind of a going theme here, the theme is what should probably stick out.
Yeah, the theme is what seems consistent, just from my perspective. And, I was naive back at the time, back when in 1969, I was just a young kid. I was like 20 years old, in the Navy. And I served in Vietnam, combat action as well. The thing is that when I got that report about a orange elliptical saucer coming out of the ocean, I couldn't imagine that anybody on Earth in 1969 had anything technology like this. It had to have been something from another world outside of our planet, and and then I was naive, and when I went to Washington to testify, each one of us, by the way, said we're willing to testify under oath in front of there's 22 cameras in the back row. Each one of us ended our testimony saying we're willing to testify under oath before Congress. And in fact, what might be interesting is for the listeners to actually hear like a few of the testimonies of the witnesses. If you'd like, I could play that.
Yeah, I would like to hear that myself. I heard it on the film when it first came out. One of my brain's farting on what they called it, the National Press Conference or something. The UFO disclosure film.
Yeah.
But yeah, a lot of people here have not heard this yet, so I think it'd be a good idea if they could.
Well, that's some good shit, I'll tell you.
You're not smoking this, are we?
Well, it's an hour and a half. What I did was I took my audio editor and narrowed it down to like 6 minutes. So if you can bear with 6 minutes, the first witness is John Callahan talking about the CIA swearing to secrecy. Then we have Captain Salas. He's controlling nuclear-tipped ICBMs when the UFO comes in and shuts it all down. And then they're talking about NASA airbrushing it out, and also. Let's see, we have Carl Wolf, who saw the alien bases, which was like these domed and mushroom-shaped buildings on the other side of the moon. And we also have Clifford Stone talking about the 57 different species. So this is 6 minutes long, but I think the listeners will find it informative.
Okay, let's go for it.
The CIA, one of the CIA men told the people they were now sworn to secrecy, that this meeting never happened and this event never happened. When I asked him why, I thought it was probably just a stealth bomb at the time. He said, well, this is the first time that we have recorded radar data on a UFO, and these guys are going to get all excited, drooling over all this data. I said, well, you're going to tell the public about it. And he says, no, we don't tell the public about this. It would take the public.
I was stationed at Malmstrom Air Force Base, Montana, as a missile launch officer. I got a call from my primary security guard upstairs. I was downstairs 60 feet underground in a capsule, monitoring and controlling 10 nuclear-tipped Minuteman missiles. I got a call that morning that they were seeing these lights flying in the sky. I got another call And this time it was a more intense tone, and the guard's voice is very clearly very frightened. He said there was a bright, glowing red object hovering outside the front gate. It was oval-shaped. He had all the other guards out there with their weapons drawn. My weapons started going down, one after the other. They went into a no-go condition, what we call a no-go condition. They were unlaunchable. Within minutes of having received that second phone call of a UFO hovering outside the front gate, we were informed that a similar incident happened at Echo Flight. They lost all kinds of their weapons, where UFOs were sighted over the launch facilities.
So we were taking pictures all the time for verification of nuclear disarmament. And there were some objects in those pictures that didn't belong there. The second prong to this whole thing is that a lot of people talk about conspiracies over shadow government. I'm willing to testify before Congress that these black operations do exist.
I was stationed at Langley Air Force Base in Virginia. In 1965, I was loaned to the Lunar Orbiter Project at NASA on Langley Field. I went to the facility, and when I walked into the facility, there were scientists from all over the world. A airman second class was in the dark room at that time. About 30 minutes into the process, he said to me, in a very distressed way, by the way, we've discovered a base on the backside of the moon. And then he proceeded to put photographs down in front of me, and clearly in these photographs were structures, mushroom-shaped buildings, spherical buildings, and towers. And at that point, I was very concerned because I knew we were working on compartmentalized security. He had breached security, and I was actually frightened at that moment. I worked there for 3 more days, and I remember going home and naively thinking, I can't wait to hear about this on the evening news. And here it is, more than 30 years later, and I hope we hear about it tonight. And I will testify under oath before Congress that what I'm saying is the truth.
I was able to go into restricted areas, which this was. And this was an aerial photograph of the Earth and the shadows of the craft or whatever it was. But I realized at this point that it's very secret, that it was kept secret, because I asked him, what are you going to do with this piece of information? And he said, we always airbrush these out before we sell them to the public. And it was a picture of a UFO. Another incident, I knew someone in quarantine with the Apollo astronauts. He told me that the Apollo astronauts saw craft on the moon when we landed. And that is what he told me. And he also was afraid, he said that the astronauts are told to keep this quiet. They're not allowed to talk about it. So I do want to let you know that I worked out there for a number of years, and I ran into this. So it's not something everyone knows that works out there for a long time. My boss didn't know about it. It's very strange, because I don't know how they can do it, but they can let some people know about it and then others not. I'm willing to testify before Congress that what I'm saying is true.
That I was involved in situations where we actually did recoveries of crashed saucers, for lack of a better term, debris thereof. There were bodies that were involved with some of these crashes, also some were alive. While we were doing all this, we were telling the American public there was nothing to it. We were telling the world there was nothing to it. But the whole situation is, we've set back, we've told the American people that there's no such thing as UFOs. I've been involved where we have recovered these objects. We know them to be of extraterrestrials. I was the first person to go ahead and see that there were bodies on it. That would be the first of approximately 12 events. UFO crashes are not events that take place every day. They're rare. I know we're not alone in the universe. I know that the absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. It's evidence that has been denied to the American people. I stand before you today in my almighty God, and I tell you this. If Congress calls me in, I stand here today prepared and ready to do just that. Governments must never lie to the people.
My question is to Clifford Stone. You said that you had seen aliens on a craft that had crashed. I wondered if you could describe what they looked like.
I could, but it would probably take a whole lot of time. The reason I state that, when I got out in 1989, we had cataloged 57 different species. You have individuals that look very much like you and myself that could walk among us and you wouldn't even notice the difference. except for some of the things that they might be able to go ahead, even in a dark room, and touch an object and go ahead and identify what color that object might be. They would have a heightened sense of smell, sight, hearing. Situation is that you had at least 3 types of the grays. You had some that were much taller than we were. The unique thing that I'd like to point out for the most part is that the entities that we did catalog were in fact humanoid beings, so to speak, not necessarily look humanoid or be bipedal such as we are. But apparently we got quite a few of the species out there that are humanoid in appearance.
So there you have just a sampling of the 21 witnesses that and what was being disclosed. You know, and it was a lot more than just we are not alone. It was pretty explosive testimonies.
Well, I'd like to know the name of the gentleman who said that he had actually saw the aliens and perhaps his rank, but he was he in the Army or part of a recovery mission, or exactly what?
Yeah, he was in the Army. That was Clifford Stone, and he was part of a retrieval team. He had, several levels above. I had a high-level top secret clearance, but there's several levels above top secret. He had a cosmic level clearance, which allowed him the cosmic level or majestic operations. They have to do, strictly with the extraterrestrial issue.
Now, I believe I've seen posts on Facebook by Clifford. Isn't he still active trying to, uncover the UFO phenomena for everybody? And hold that thought till we come back. I can hear the music starting to interrupt us now. Folks, we'll be right back.
Oh, good point.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Hello, I'm Benjamin.
And I'm Jasmine.
We are inner tour guides with black belts in the art of self-awareness and how to live a passionate life.
We love talking with you about what you have and what you want.
More importantly, we want to explore with you how to bridge the gap between that wanting and bring it right back to the having.
So what are your hopes, dreams, and desires?
Is it money, love, success, health, wealth, or something even more specific?
Let us guide you through the exciting adventure of turning what you want into what you have.
Come join in the conversation on our show, The Inner Revolution.
We look forward to exploring with you.
The finder of lost children and missing persons, Monique Lassan. Surveillance civil and criminal investigations, I investigate.
No, I am the chosen one.
Do not underestimate the power of good, and do not dismiss the strength of the child.
Yes, every Wednesday evening on Revolution Radio, come join our very own Eye Investigatrix, Monique Lassan, with her private Eye X-Files.
So you're the finder of lost children?
Private Eye X-Files, every Wednesday from 10 to midnight Eastern, Studio B, on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com.
I realize it's very hard for you to take in. But is your destiny to find the golden child?
Most freeze. That's your cerebral cortex looking for an answer it doesn't have.
See? Even your brain knows you're screwed.
The God is filling with adrenaline right now, whether you know it or not. Your heart's beating fast. It's getting a little harder to breathe. The neurobiological system is telling it to run, but your knees are too weak to move.
Fear is not real.
The only place that fear can exist is in our thoughts of the future. It is a product of our imagination, causing us to fear things that do not at present and may not ever exist. That is near insanity. Do not misunderstand me. Danger is very real, but fear is a choice. We are all telling ourselves a story.
You're listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. 100% listener-supported radio. Reporting to danger, unafraid. Right here, where information never sleeps. Revolution Radio.
Join Revolution Radio every Wednesday, 8 p.m. Eastern Time on Studio B for Momentary Zen with host Zen Garcia at freedomslips.com, the People Station.
He wants a challenge. Let's give him one.
The voice that whispers in your ears are the screams that you fear. The mind you cannot defy is the heart that rules mankind. The people who made you are the gods that will save you. I am Steve Travesty. I am the voice. The ghost in the machine. Ghost in the Machine. Tuesdays, 8 p.m. Studio A.
Right here, Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, where information never sleeps. Revolution Radio. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Okay, everybody, we're back, and before we go into the show, I want to remind everybody real quick that Talk Now Radio and Revolution Radio are listener-supported, so clicking on ads, donation buttons, any of that stuff, it helps keep us censorship-free, and we appreciate the help. So, Dan, going back to where we were at about Clifford Stone, can you help me fill in the last thing I said I was wondering about him that I forgot during break time?
Yeah, we wondered if he's still active and things.
That was the one. Thank you.
Yeah, everybody's still active in their different ways. Some of the witnesses, have, withdrawn a lot, and seeing that. Let's say, for example, Carl Wolf, who saw the alien base clearly on the other side of the moon, indicating the reality of the secret space program that's been going on since the 40s, he said, here it is, 30 years later, and I hope to see it on the evening news. Well, guess what? That was 2001. This is 2014. You won't hear it on the CBS Evening News. In fact, I have a little clip if you want to hear. It's about a minute and a half long. That's what CNN covered of this event. You realize I'm only giving you a snapshot of about 6 minutes of an hour and a half disclosure event,
Right.
which a lot of testimonies were revealed. And what they did was, what the media does is they use the tagline is like, "We are not alone," but in 2011. Thousands of signatures went on a petition to the White House saying that we have, hundreds of witnesses and everything, and the Obama administration essentially come back with the tagline that the government always comes back with, "Oh, there's no evidence. We have absolutely no evidence." You call 500 people with supporting documentation, no evidence, So what the media does is it completely dances around this thing that, you've got people who, just want to let other people know and have a congressional hearing that we're not alone and UFOs are real, but it's much deeper than that. It's not about the lights up in the sky. It's more about the lies that are happening on the ground. And so what they do is they make it sound like, and you have to understand, like CNN, who's kind of a flagship on the psyops on this whole thing. The CIA is tagged into the Tavistock Institute, which has thousands of think tanks. In other words, they've got the art of psychological perception down to such a fine art. Back in the 30s, they were doing the engineering and consent. They were doing psychological warfare. Well, way back, and today it's down to such a fine art that they can craft a perception to the listeners. And so what they did was basically said, we got a group that's, we've heard these stories before, but what do they want to do with this information? They want President Bush to have a congressional hearing on this matter, despite the criticisms from skeptics. Here, I'll just play this little, if I may. How the CNN covered that event.
Okay.
Life on other planets? Some former military and government personnel say they have proof there is. Elaine Quijano explains.
We've seen the photographs and heard the stories of what some say is evidence of UFOs. Now a group of scientists, former Air Force and FAA officials, is lending its voice to the argument that we are not alone. Dr. Stephen Greer heads up the Disclosure Project, a group that compiles information from people who say they've encountered extraterrestrial forms of life.
We can establish through this testimony that these objects of extraterrestrial origin have been tracked on radar going thousands of miles per hour, stopping and making right-hand turns.
Since 1993, Dr. Greer says he has videotaped testimony from more than 100 people about what they say are close encounters. People like retired Navy Commander Pilot Graham Bethune, who believes he saw a UFO 50 years ago while flying to Newfoundland.
Then it appeared over to the right and moved out slowly and flew with us. It was still not at our altitude, but we could see the shape of it. It had a dome.
In addition, the Disclosure Project says it has documents supporting its case, including FAA records and CIA memos. What do members plan to do with their information? They hope Congress and President Bush take notice. They want to see congressional hearings into the matter, despite criticism from skeptics.
Those that don't want to believe you will never believe you anyway, so it doesn't matter. It doesn't change the truth.
A spokesperson for the Senate Science, Technology, and Space Committee says no congressional hearings are planned right now. Elaine Quijano, CNN.
You see how they do this. The people that are news reporters and things for the local. When I toured across the United States in these major cities, every major city, the local, CBS, NBC, ABC, they would come in and interview us, and without exception, San Diego had dancing alien dolls with smoke. San Francisco had, the Disclosure Project's looking to aliens to solve the world's energy problems, and then up in Portland, they were talking UFOs, free energy. Come on, let's get on with the big story. This week, the bozos meet the bonkos in the playoffs, and they go on like that. So, without exception, they ridicule and make fun of it. But you have to understand that the CIA controls not not the reporters. It controls the distribution of the information. So they're reading the scripts that are perfectly prepared. I saw a little thing on I think it was Russia Today where they had all these different from across the United States, all these different networks, and it had something about the Easter Bunny, due to economic sanctions, lost some spring in its step this year, and you see every reporter saying the exact same thing, So what they're doing, and when I was an ABC newsman, we had teletypes, American Press, United Press International, and I'd rip off the news, and I do the sports report, and I was the chief engineer for the station, but I'd also, do the news reports sometimes. So it's a matter of the control of the information, and if you listen to the actual event, the first the first half hour of all the things that were disclosed, you have to really look to see how you can cut out something that just says that we're just talking about UFOs, where they cut out the one little part that Stephen Greer is saying, these objects of extraterrestrial origins have been tracked in radar going thousands of miles per hour, stopping and making right-hand turns, but then they cut it, and I'll just play for you what he says right after that.
Well, before you do that, I want to give everybody ample warning that I can now hear thunder outside in the front of the house here. I'm assuming it's fixing to come down a rain pour. Many nights could get knocked out, so if my end goes dead, if there's any host out there listening to this here show, you may want to come into Studio A and fill in from the blank airtime. And if it does happen, Dan, I may have to reschedule you to finish this up on a day when there ain't no rain, and it may not happen, but this way, by me telling everybody, there's no surprise and people can try to prepare.
Geoengineering, they can steer that storm right at you then. Okay. Anyway, let me go ahead and play what was omitted after these objects have been tracked on. Note what he's saying right after stopping and making right-hand turns. Here we go.
All right.
We can establish through this testimony that these objects of extraterrestrial origin have been tracked on radar going thousands of miles per hour, stopping and making right-hand turns. That they use anti-gravity propulsion systems, which we have already figured out how they work in classified projects in the United States, Great Britain, and elsewhere. That these objects have landed on terra firma, at times have been disabled, and have been retrieved specifically by teams within the United States. That extraterrestrial life forms have been retrieved, and their vehicles have been taken and studied thoroughly for at least 50 years. We can prove through the testimony and documents that we will be presenting that this subject has been hidden from members of Congress and at least 2 presidential administrations, and that the Constitution of the United States has been subverted by the growing power of these classified projects, and that this is a danger to the national security.
The red flag all over the place. You wouldn't want, if that went out on CNN, that would be like a red flag. And all of us have been in the military, have been sworn to protect the Constitution against enemies, foreign and domestic. And, as far as I can tell, all the indications look like basically we have a domestic intrusion that happened that's using our national security system apparatus against us. And, after this, after the National Press Club, CBS sent a special assignment team from Los Angeles. I was down in San Diego. And I said, look, I'm not willing to do this testimony. I'm not willing to do this interview unless I can say we have these scientists within these black projects that are willing, once they're released from national security oath, that can prove that we have the technology to end the energy and environmental crisis. Because at the time, when I was on Capitol Hill, I went into a couple of meetings, and the number one thing at the time, they were having rolling blackouts, on the West Coast, and the pollution and everything is going on. It was like a number one topic, and anyway, CBS promised up and down that I could, I would be able to say that, but what happened was they did a basically a cookie cutter following CNN's lead. And the only thing that came out of 45 minutes of interviewing and all the information that I disclosed was, we've reached a critical time where the truth needs to be revealed to the people. The trouble is, the people never got what that truth was. If I may, I can play that little short clip.
Okay.
We are not alone. That's the message a group of pilots, scientists, and former government officials want Congress to hear. Ken Shotnick shows us tonight what some people are calling a UFO cover-up.
I've never seen it. Look at that.
I don't know, but I got it on tape.
A strand of moving light in the sky over Phoenix. A bright glowing streak dashing through West Covina. What looks like a flying saucer tracked on radar over Mexico City. Are these UFOs caught on tape? Dan Wills is a former radio operator for the Navy.
I took personally communications from ships that were reporting the extraterrestrial craft merging out of the ocean and shooting off into space.
He's among a group of scientists, military, and former FAA officials calling for congressional hearings to establish the presence of UFOs and extraterrestrials. 21 members of that group already have testified in Washington for what's known as the Disclosure Project. Dr. Stephen Greer is the director of the Disclosure Project. He's gathered 400 witnesses who say it's time for government secrecy to end.
We can establish through this testimony that these objects of extraterrestrial origin have been tracked on radar going thousands of miles per hour.
It's come to a critical point where the truth needs to be revealed to the people.
They believe a congressional hearing is the only way to set the record straight. The Disclosure Project has its work cut out for it because as of right now, no congressional hearings are planned. For CBS 2 News Special Assignment, I'm Ken.
Now, what happened with that was after it aired, obviously, notice the tagline, "We are not alone." That works if they're planning a false flag invasion of, hoaxed extraterrestrial in the future, that "we are not alone" tag. But what happened was the woman who was the interviewer and everything, who made the promise, she was almost in tears. She left a message on my voicemail. She said, "I'm sorry, the higher executives made me cut out that part." And, this kind of exposes the mechanism of how they maintain the secrecy, through the mainstream media. You have to look back in, 1982 or so, there was like 50-some corporations. Now there's like 4 or 5 that control all the, so they consolidated the control elements of just a few corporations maintaining control over the, but you have shows like yours, Royce, that, lets the cat out of the bag.
Well, yeah, that's part of the reason why I encourage people to remember we're listener supported, because if we were like Channel 13 or CBS or one of those, we'd have to, put a cap on it, just like your lady over there at CBS had to do, simply because we got a paycheck.
Exactly.
So that this just, prevents them from doing that, although they're trying to take other steps, as I understand, by monitoring the net and taking down websites with certain material, if they ever get to end that net neutrality law that they've been trying to pass.
Yeah, well, the idea is to have complete control. Right now, the internet's working for a great surveillance tool. Snowden said, that, they using it in our name and using it against us. And then William Binney, who was for 30 years, back in with the NSA, top code breaker, broke the Soviet code and things like that. He was disgusted during the Bush administration of how they were making the changes, and quit. And just recently, about a month ago, he said that the primary goal of the NSA is population control. So you've got, as far as you can see from indications, throughout history, you basically have this cabal that's connected with the Nazis of the faction that infiltrated into our CIA, into our national security apparatus, and our government, as astronaut Gordon Cooper said, that there's people in Washington that they have to say one lie after another lie to cover, and we're embarrassed, and they don't know how they're going to bring this out, because basically they couldn't come out and say it. And at the same time, you've got you had two CIAs. You had one CIA that was hunting down Nazis back then, and you had another one that was recruiting them. So you have the split of the white hats and black hats, you could say, within our intelligence community, that both of them don't want, to disclose this information, you would seem, because of the elements of both of what they're hiding, because you open that door of the extraterrestrial reality. That's why they've done such extreme measures over the years. People have been murdered. All the ridicule and debunking and everything that's been done is because if they let the cat out of the bag, it opens that Pandora's box that reveals this breakaway civilization, shows that they've retarded purposely humanity so that we have to have these power lines. We haven't needed these, or having to run our engines on gasoline. I know there's a huge infrastructure in the oil industry, especially there in Texas, and nobody wants to tear down anybody's empire, but the thing is that we've got, things like Fukushima, we've got, the Gulf oil spill, we've got things that are destroying this planet. And there's always profit to be made, if things could be retrofitted with the new technologies. It doesn't have to be a world the way it is. There's a whole nother hidden civilization that has these technologies that can stop, this is destruction of this beautiful planet that we're residing on. And the whole mentality of these people, it's kind of like along with the Nazis and the eugenics and everything, controlling. I think there's plenty for everybody, and that, if these technologies could be released, we could start working together, because as science gets into the deeper levels of, back in 1957, Professor Heinz Isaac, he was the chairman of the Department of Psychology at the University of London. He wrote a letter insinuating there was this gigantic conspiracy, this is back in 57 again, involving 30 major universities all over the world and hundreds of highly respected scientists to silence the truth about what we knew about the powers of human consciousness. And, in 1946, right after the war, they took out all the connections with the Nazis and the occult, because the Nazis were thinking out of the box. They were looking at every approach possible. And it may be that the King Solomon's treasure with his ancient tablets and scrolls that came from the ancient mystery schools of Egypt that have been guarded for so many years. We're not taught any of this stuff in our school system. May have given them even more insight on how to control the reality that all of us are in, and that has to do with, it gets in deeper down the rabbit hole, you could say, on what is reality, because you're looking at reality as being holographic. Everything's proving that, and that everything is interconnected, unlike the Michelson-Morley experiment that was done before they had more sophisticated equipment back in the late 90s, that the Air Force was able to prove that everything is interconnected. And I've worked with scientists, top scientists of IBM, who thought the plant communication thing was garbage, and he threw it in the trash and decided to do a creativity experiment, and then was able to communicate to a plant from Czechoslovakia. This is back in the the 70s. Dr. Marcel Vogel, and was able to show that everything is connected, instantaneous. It's like the singularity of consciousness and thought. So, Hitler said, "Give me a child, any." I think it was like 5 or 7 years old, and he's mine for life. Well, think of, I'm an old guy, I'm 65 now, and I remember watching the Day They Were Stood Still and all the old science fiction movies, Forbidden Planet and everything, and I just thought that was incredible back in the 50s, watching all these science fiction movies, but I had no idea that the actual real thing was going on during this time until in my late 60s now. So you can imagine the kids being born into generation after generation with the history books rewritten about what actually happened in the World War II. That we won over Germany, but we didn't. But the Nazis escaped. Hitler escaped, Himmler escaped, the 250,000 Germans escaped. All the Nazis got rewritten. They infiltrated into our country, and they instigated their plan, their fallback plan, to do psychological warfare to control all the perception matrix in order to hide these breakaway civilizations. So here it is, 2014, and you have these elements that are operating behind the shield of national security, controlling the distribution of the information to our news networks. We have people that are controlling the education in the school, that's writing the school books. And so the kids nowadays are a whole different mindset than the older generations.
Not to mention what's being controlled in the church.
And we have the interface with the clergy, saying, oh, go along with Romans 13, do what Caesar says, so yeah, you have all these elements. Yeah, the religion has a high influence, and the education, our media, all these things create our agreed upon reality of perception that we've been born into. And so this effectively hides these civilizations while the Earth is continually being, we got Fukushima, look at what's going on there. And then we have hundreds of these suckers all over the planet,
Yeah.
And most
look
of them
at this
are built
hand, look
on
at this
faults.
hand, see what that one does.
Yeah.
Listen, do you have any kids? And if so, are you sharing this knowledge with them and educating them in it?
I don't have any children.
Ah.
A lot of my family is evangelical Christians, and and they think, oh, the crazy uncle, he's all thinking of talking about aliens and stuff, But
don't feel bad. I'm in exactly the same boat, but I do have kids. But yeah, my family thinks I'm kind of nutso too. They pray for me on a constant basis. But do you have any more of these audios that you'd like us to hear real quick before we run out of time?
Sure. There's a lot of threats to keep this secret. General Lufkin was threatened, and actually, let me play a short one here about when he was involved. He actually saw the wreckage that came from the Roswell incident, and here, I'll just play that one. He was on Eisenhower's staff.
We were in the basement of the Pentagon, and in those days, that was in 1959, there was a tremendous amount of security there in the base of the Pentagon. Anybody who's worked there knows what I'm talking about. Colonel Hollibird brought out a piece of what appeared to be metallic, it looked like a yardstick. It had deciphering, it had encryption on it. He describe them as being symbols of instruction, and that's as far as he would go. But he did infer that the instructions, whatever they might have been, were something that was important enough for the military to keep working on a constant basis. It seemed giant-like when I saw it because it was the first time I'd ever seen anything like this before, and all eyes were just peeled on that particular thing. And when he told us what it was, it was frightening. It was eerie. There, you could have heard a pin drop in the room when it was first mentioned. Well, he said it had been taken from one of the craft that had crashed in New Mexico.
Yeah,
and that it had been taken from a box of materials that the military was working on. They didn't use the word reverse engineering at that time, but it was something similar to the reverse engineering that they felt like they needed to work on, and it was going to take years to do this. Extraterrestrial bodies, yes. There were either 3 or 5, and one was alive, partially alive at the time that this happened, and I do not know what may have happened to him after that.
Oh, Royce, not that back long not that long ago, the people on this planet used to think that, you go off the ocean and the Earth's flat.
Yeah, right.
They didn't understand the curvature. And then later they were thinking, well, this Earth has got to be at the center of the universe, and the sun rotates around us. And not that long ago, they were burning people at the stake about that. And now, I think a lot of your listener audience knows that, of the trillions of galaxies and trillions of stars and Earth-like planets, and I think MUFON's reporting something like 15,000 or 17,000 reports a month of around the planet of UFO. You got to figure, okay, maybe 5% are extraterrestrial, right? Misidentified things. But even so, the fact that extraterrestrial life forms are here, and maybe even in our oceans, like my report, looks like, according to Soviet intelligence, most of the UFO things happen popping in and out of the oceans. So, it could be what a perfect place where people can't see if you're way down deep in the ocean, So, if they can go through, I was with Jaime Maussan in Mexico, and he's showing these Swedish researchers, and a volcano is about to erupt, and here the UFO comes out of the clouds. They're watching all the meters, right? They're watching this thing about ready to go, and the UFO shoots down into the volcano, and about a minute later, it shoots out in the direction it came out, and the whole volcano just quiets down. So they have the ability to manipulate time, space, matter. So being down the bottom of the ocean or going through a volcano or going through hyperspace is not, you got to think about civilizations thousands or millions of years in advance of us. When they first started reverse engineering this stuff, it didn't make any sense because it didn't have any meters, didn't have any levers. How's this thing put together? There's no rivets, everything was seamless, and it seemed like there was a conscious interface, and we're just beginning to get into that, to some point as our they have these quantum computers that the NSA is using, and it has unbelievable processing capability with artificial intelligence that could, monitor all the conversations, figure out, who's who, and if they're whether or not, we're buying the psyops on the mainstream media or what. So, most people understand that the extraterrestrial intelligence is real. Not necessarily Satan's demons or anything coming here, but they're, all these different species, raised on different planets, and the human race needs to open its mind to that, as Clifford Stone said, most of them were humanoid and bitrepid like we are, so the great creator is not limited just to planet Earth. So, but the human race on this planet's been hoodwinked, and the world's been trapped in this lie, and it needs to be disclosed. And I believe the more people become aware, I believe science has shown that the collective consciousness that we're all tied into, the 100th monkey thing, is a real thing, and everybody's thinking about this stuff and becoming more aware. Like when you watch television, look at it objectively. Don't just like suck it in and take it all as fact. Because there's hidden hands that are manipulating this information that we're perceiving, and these things for the sustainability and future of humanity. We need to release these technologies for the good of humanity, and we need to find out more about, who we are as, human beings on this planet, and the effects of consciousness and things that are associated with that they've purposely, like the professor said that they've removed this out of the universities, out of all the books and things. So, I guess all we can do is blog and do talk radio shows, and hopefully, because all the channels for change have been compromised. You go to Washington and try to testify under oath, and that's what happens. You go on Capitol Hill, talk to senators and congresspeople. You write or fax them, that's what happens. You go to the city and disclose like we did, and that's what happens on the controlled networks. So all the channels for change, just as the CIA director and even some presidents have found, they've been denied access. So there's this group that has been overseeing, controlling this issue and manipulating the perception of the public all these years. And this has got to change for the future of humanity.
I'm pretty sure the reason that they're withholding information from the public is greed. They want the technology to their own selves for their own power.
It's pretty much who's in control, And I'm sure there are even fractions, they have the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, you've got the Bilderberg meetings and all the people that go there, including Steven Spielberg back in 1999. That the first one happened to be in 1954, that was headed by former Nazi SS Prince Bernhard. So you have the Nazi influence throughout this whole thing. And the Nazis, again, are just a fraction, because the Nazis are, and the Rothschilds are Jewish, so you have elements, they're probably fighting amongst themselves, the mentality. But they're definitely very highly organized, as Kennedy, pointed out, that, they have a discipline and infiltration that, with a wartime discipline that no peacetime operation would want to match. They have their fingers in all the pies. So, trying to make change, you can protest till you're blue in the face. It's interesting that Larry Warren, who was one of the witnesses that joined me, he was talking. They hit him up the head with a gun butt and made him sign these papers. You're going to, keep this quiet, But they came in. A UFO landed outside in the UK in Brentwaters and reprogrammed all the nuclear missiles that they weren't supposed to have, just with a light beam, similar to what they did with Captain Salas there in Montana. But it's a
seems like a hopeless cause sometimes. Now, it's been, some of the study that I've done on this here has indicated to me, though, that the Nazis, and probably Rothschild himself, have links back to the ancient Aryans of Atlantis, and in fact, so do the Hebrews. And if you think about it, the kind of infiltration that's going on in America and other governments around the world today is really very similar to Joseph and his story of going into Egypt, don't you think? Going in peacefully and ended up in control, in other words, in the end?
It's all, it's global in nature. And it's very occult. You have to understand, you have to research and understand what the occult is not, the word occult all it means is hidden. It's science, I'm not in, people with the occult stuff pulling stuff out of their butt, I'm a pretty skeptical person, and, I'm more for hard evidence, that's shown in science. And actually, the science is showing more and more of what the occult traditions have been talking about for thousands of years. And, these secret societies and the Rothschilds and Rockefellers and all the Freemasons, which is kind of interesting that only Kennedy and Lincoln were in some way were not tied in with the Freemasons.
Also interesting that they were both assassinated.
Yeah, exactly. So, they didn't go along with the plan. In secret societies, you're doing these oaths of secrecy that you better not, and you look at all the ties and with Bush being a Knight of Malta, just like William Casey, which was Reagan's CIA director, who told Reagan with in a briefing that they've been manipulating all the movies on the extraterrestrial, and it was Operation Dove, that in order to hide their secret anti-gravity craft. So you've got this group that's kind of tied, interwoven and tightly knit organization that is highly infiltrated into the whole structures. And being, since the United States is a world power, infiltration into our national security, and be able to do anything as Truman set it up with no congressional oversight, the CIA. So they can do anything without any accountability. So it's a absolute perfect cover to do all their operations in all these other countries, and then to control the media and the perception of the populace. What a setup.
So before anybody can make any changes, the first thing they have to do is do something about the CIA and their accountability, because as long as they can operate in secret, it doesn't matter anything else you do.
Yeah, and that's why Kennedy was killed, because he was looking in to expose the new MJ-12 that Eisenhower created with the secret executive agreement. And, they had, all the drug running operations, which they unaccountable, beside the Federal Reserve and all the taxes. They've got, and when I was in Vietnam, the captain was seeing, the drugs being loaded up on the aircraft. So they have a huge amount of money bringing in through their drug operations, which the Nazis going through South America, gained control of a lot of these things. And so the huge, unimaginable amounts of money. They got more money than people can even conceive, And so you got all this money with brilliant scientists into these black projects since the early 30s. I'm sorry, about the late 30s to present. And with Ben Rich saying anything you can imagine, they figured an error in the equation that they can go. You don't need to travel the speed of light in order to get from one place in the universe to another. They figured out how to warp time and space and to relocate in another place. They got technologies that's science fiction to the average person in the world. And we, the thing is that we've got the goods on them. We've got 500 witnesses. We've got the proof. But they control the media. So, and they pretty much control, both sides of the Democrats and the Republicans, the people in Capitol Hill. So, the only thing I can think of is, a propagation of awareness through the public that, we just, just tired of being lied to, and let's. I'm not sure how it's all going to pan out, but people just need to become aware and not just don't blindly accept anything I'm saying, please.
Right.
Everybody needs to do their own research and find out for themselves. This company in Hollywood wanted me to write an article on media control. I was shocked what I was discovering, and I was doing reputable resources. If you go to thewebmatrix.net, you can read the article. It's kind of long, but it kind of gives a historical timeline of how they basically infiltrated, how they controlled it, and where we are today.
Yeah, I noticed it was pretty in-depth, and you started mentioning people and naming names, as the song said once. But the thought does occur to me that if anybody wanted to make a change, one good place to start is so many people love to deep sea dive anyway. Why not go on an underwater expedition in some of these locations where USOs had popped up out of the water and see if there's anything down there, there could even be caves that were carved out by nature or later built out by extraterrestrials or even man, that they can go under the water and up inside the cave, which would lead to a tunnel that could come out God knows anywhere else, for example. if you could find something like that and expose it, you made a step in the right direction.
Well, think of the technology that they have, that they can actually create matter out of the primordial space, you know, and they can fly a UFO right into a mountain, you know. So, you know, they can effectively hide if they wanted to. I worked for 13 years in the Naval Electronic Engineering Center on military satellite equipment, and one of the jobs I had to do a security, it was a security guard for a top secret project that was monitoring everything that was going underneath the ocean. I wasn't allowed in there, but I kind of got an overview of what they were doing. So, you know, they may be, I'm sure they're monitoring quite extensively, you know, and there was this one astrophysicist, Kip Thorne, who it was a Russian documentary talking about the Nazi base in Antarctica and how they sent James Forrestal sent Admiral Byrd down there with a whole military armada to try to wipe them out down in 1947, but UFOs came out of the ocean and wiped them out instead, so half their fleet was pushed up. You know, the whole thing is that they God, I lost my thought. Anyway.
I've had that happen to me,
when
too.
You get 65 every so often, you know.
I'm only 55 when it happens, so don't feel bad. Now, listen, I was going to mention we're running.
I was going to say there's a wormhole they discovered above Alaska where my UFO report went out, and there's one above Antarctica. And anyway, that was within the document. That's what I was trying to lead to, is that there's these wormholes that allow, again, warp time-space and allows you to end up someplace else in the universe.
You sure these aren't more like Stargates?
Kind of like a Stargate, I guess. You know, it's the time, the structure of time and space, as they're finding it, can be actually, it's bendable, it's warpable. Just like you look at stars from a distance, and there's a slight variation in the magnetic because of the warping of the magnetic field. With certain technologies that they have, you know, and Jim Nichols can tell you more about the Nazi Bell Project, where they had these spinning vortices of counter spinning vortices of Mercury, one spinning one way, the other was spinning, and it actually warps the time-space vector. And, I forgot to mention, on my own research, you can look this up in Wikipedia, that during 1944, there was 2 Nazi U-boats that were sunk, one off Norway, one going way down to Antarctica. One had 33 tons of sealed containers of mercury, and the other one had 67 tons of mercury. I mean, you know, during a war effort, having that much mercury on board, that's a lot of thermometers, unless you're using it for something else, such as anti-gravity propulsion, like the Vermatas and the alien reproduction vehicles.
Yeah, you really don't know if they have Stargate technology, but what maybe the ancient Israelites didn't have it as well, or the ancient Canaanites or Sumerians. I recently read that science today still hasn't even really figured out exactly who the Sumerian people were. They just kind of, popped up on the scene, in other words.
Oh, well, you look back, I studied with the Rosicrucian Order since 1976, and all, the Freemasons and the Knights of Templar, the Rosicrucians, all the secret societies all based their understandings back to ancient Egypt, back about 3500 BC, during the time of Akhenaten. And if you look at the hieroglyphs on the wall, you see and even the busts and things with and the skulls they find with these elongated, huge skulls. I mean, these people were, I don't think of this planet. The skulls were huge, and they were the ones that developed the mystery school teachings, which eventually went into the Middle East, And then I think it resurged around the 1600s or something. They had to go underground, because, the church was after everybody. And, they came back in. It was you look at the whole thing with the Thule Society with Hitler and the mystical teachings that came through there. So this whole thing is interwoven in the whole thing, and it's all based on some extraterrestrial knowledge, I believe.
Which I wouldn't find in the least bit surprising. I do want to mention, however, I show that we got about roughly 10 to 15 minutes, probably closer to 10 left, and I want to make sure you have a chance to cover everything you want to. So I thought I'd let you have an opportunity now to, mention anything we haven't mentioned yet you'd like to get out there.
I've just been playing it by ear with your voice. Essentially, the message is, look for your own indicators. Don't take my word for any of this, but the indications look like, our national security system has been infiltrated. There's good people that have also been wanting to keep this secret, but I think it just got out of hand. And that there's a breakaway civilization that is purposely keeping the rest of the population on this planet retarded, technologically, spiritually, and otherwise. And that the world doesn't have to be the way it has been. And that, educate yourself. And if you find it to be true, you'll be shocked like I am. You don't have to be a top secret military witness that testified. I'm just a regular guy like everybody else. I'm just one of over 500 witnesses. Spread the awareness, and I know. Hopefully, we can turn the situation around on this planet some way.
Well, we can always hope. What I got to wonder is you now specifically. How have you dealt with having to break your oath in order to make this information public?
That's an excellent question. I figured we had 500 witnesses. 21 were crazy enough to go in front of the 22 cameras and break their national security oath. And I knew that there was. I was, at the time I was naive. I didn't realize just how infiltrated the media was and how they would sanitize it out. And I figured, well, it would look pretty obvious, if they threw all of us in jail, right? So, and beside that, the core of that answer to that question is our legal counsel, Daniel Sheehan, who was one of the witnesses who testified regarding Jimmy Carter tried to gain access, and he was denied. It was one of his presidential campaign promises to bring out the UFO information, but the CIA director, George H.W. Bush, denied him access. He basically said these operations are constitutionally illegal, operating outside the law, so they cannot cite the rule of law against us. That doesn't mean they can't do things, but so essentially that's the answer to that question.
And essentially, we have little protection since they've been deemed above the law, in other words.
Well, this information needs to come out, I mean, when you have a director of the CIA being denied access, which was the seed that started the Disclosure Project, and, it's interesting that Clinton just went on Jimmy Kimmel Live about a month or so ago, and he said, he sent his aides over to Area 51, and he found no evidence, and there was no extraterrestrial, but I sure hope nothing like Independence Day happens, but at least we'd all gather together and make things nice, he says, echoing Ronald Reagan's UN speech saying that imagine if we had an alien foe, how our differences, and we unite the world to fight this alien foe, which goes along with Wernher von Braun's warning that the final card would be the extraterrestrial card they would play. So, that
makes some other interesting points, though. One of them being we've already been how long on this planet that they ET could have invaded and created war or whatever they wanted to that they have not. And why haven't they? that's what they wanted. So it leads me to ask, is ET really the threat, or is these rich people, the banking cabal, the real threat?
They've been here before the dawn of mankind. In fact, probably a lot of religious events of the people, the primitive people back then, inspired a lot of things. You look at, Constantine and the church editing things in the Bible and things, taking things out. There's human elements of control that have been in everything, and that, They like Captain Salas said, when they shone a light beam down on his nuclear ICBM tipped missiles, they could have destroyed them. They could have wiped them out, but all they did was turn them off, and with their technology, nuclear missiles are nothing. It's like a firecracker compared to them. So they've been here for thousands of years, and they could have wiped us out a long time ago if that was what the goal was.
And my thought is they probably still could, for however much we've advanced. They've had the same time to advance even more themselves, which would keep them that much ahead of us at all times, no matter how far we get. So if they had the means, what's stopping them? Unless, of course, they're not the ones that really has the hand in the cookie jars, in other words.
Well, they're not coming from a conscious perspective as we do on Earth, like, back in the 40s, everything is like, oh, hi, how are we going to get weapons out of this? This is great, we can fight our adversaries, so they're coming from you're talking thousands and millions of years in advance, understanding consciousness, understanding the greater connection to the creative force that created everything. They have an understanding that the humans can't, in their mind, be able to comprehend.
Well, I hate to do this to you, Dan, but I hear the music interrupting you there. I guess that's our signal that everything's up. Don't forget to go to www.talknowradio.net. I'll be talking to Dezina Scipia this coming Saturday at 1 p.m. Central Time. And can you give us your website one more time, Dan?
Yeah, thewebmatrix.net. And I enjoy doing the show. Well, we rolled through 2 hours, didn't we?
Yeah, we did. Okay, it's been a real pleasure. You folks have a good, rest of the week, and we'll talk at you later.
These guys are hammers.
Thank you, Royce. Enjoy it.
Hammers, everything looks like nails.
You too. I really did.
You were meant to. So you see something that's important, you call it out, and we'll make it happen.
Okay. Mother Nature is a serial killer. No one's better, more creative,